Most men think love disappears suddenly. It doesn't. What usually fades first is emotional safety. And when that's missing, love never fully forms to begin with. If you've ever felt her pull away without a clear reason, if her words sounded warm but her actions stayed distant, there's a chance she wasn't losing love. She was never anchored in it. That truth is uncomfortable, but clarity often is. This matters because men are taught to respond to distance with effort, more texts, more reassurance, more availability. And every one of those reactions feels logical in the moment. But emotionally, they do the opposite of what you intend. They tell her you're unstable inside her silence. Female attraction doesn't grow from pressure. It grows from a balance of safety and challenge. When that balance is missing early, what looks like love is often just attention, comfort, or familiarity. That's why understanding this changes how you date, not by teaching you tactics, but by teaching you restraint. Because the first sign she never truly loved you is subtle. She was emotionally comfortable taking from you, but uneasy giving back. You noticed it in small moments. She enjoyed your presence, but not your depth. She leaned on you during her lows, but disappeared during yours. This happens because emotional love requires risk, and she never fully risked herself with you. Not her pride, not her vulnerability, not her reputation. Which brings us to something most men misunderstand. Women don't bond through words, they bond through emotional investment. Time spent is not investment. Sex is not investment. Attention is not investment. Risk is. When a woman loves deeply, she slowly lowers her guard. She allows herself to be seen in imperfect moments. She cares how you see her, even when she's not at her best. If she never did that, it's not because you failed, it's because she never felt emotionally anchored. Another quiet sign is this. She mirrored your energy when it benefited her, but never when it required effort. She could be affectionate when she wanted closeness, warm when she needed support, engaged when it served her emotional state. But when you pulled back even slightly, she didn't move toward you. She simply let the distance grow. That tells you something important. Emotionally invested women respond to distance with curiosity. Uninvested women respond with relief. Not anger, not fear, relief. And that relief is rarely loud. It shows up as indifference disguised as being busy. If this is resonating, understand this clearly. You weren't weak for staying. You weren't foolish for hoping. You were responding from attachment, not clarity. But attachment without mutual investment slowly erodes your sense of self. That's why this hurts more than rejection. Rejection is clean. This wasn't. It left you questioning your worth, your timing, your value. And that confusion is exactly what happens when affection exists without emotional commitment. So, we'll go more deeper into the shifts that never happened, the signs that would have shown real love forming, but didn't. For now, sit with this question. Were you building connection, or were you just making it easier for her to stay comfortable? Real love leaves traces, not dramatic ones, quiet ones. And when you look back honestly, what hurts most is not what she did. It's what never changed. The second sign she never truly loved you is this. She never adjusted her behavior to protect the bond. When a woman is emotionally invested, she becomes aware of impact. She thinks before speaking. She notices how distance affects you. She doesn't want to damage what she values. If her words cut deep and she brushed it off, if her actions created confusion and she minimized it, that wasn't confidence. That was detachment. Because emotional love creates responsibility, and she never took responsibility for how she made you feel. Another shift that never happened was emotional alignment. You may have noticed she shared stories, but rarely shared feelings. She talked about events, people, plans, but when it came to inner states, fear, doubt, insecurity, she stayed guarded. This happens when a woman enjoys connection but avoids dependence. She liked how you made her feel, but she didn't want to need you, and needing you is where love begins to take shape. A third sign is how she treated your silence. Emotionally invested women feel silence. They don't panic, but they notice. They wonder what shifted. They reflect. They lean in gently. If your silence went unnoticed, if she didn't check in, if days passed without curiosity, That tells you she wasn't emotionally tracking you. You were present in her life, but not central. Another overlooked signal is how she spoke about you to others. When a woman loves, she protects your image, even when frustrated, even when unsure. If she joked at your expense, downplayed your importance, or spoke ambiguously about what you were, she was keeping her options emotionally open. Love closes doors, comfort leaves them ajar. You might also recognize this one. She enjoyed attention, but resisted presence. She liked messages, validation, being thought of. But spending unstructured time together felt inconsistent or conditional. That's because presence deepens bonds, and she didn't want depth, not with you. This doesn't mean she's incapable of love. It means she wasn't ready to invest it there. And here's where many men turn inward in the wrong way. They assume they weren't enough. But emotional availability isn't earned through effort. It's invited through stability. When you over-explain, over-give, or over-pursue, you remove the space where attraction grows. Not because you did too much, but because you did it from anxiety, not abundance. There's another quiet sign that often gets missed. She didn't grow with you. Love evolves, it deepens, it matures. If months passed and the dynamic stayed shallow, if you were still guessing where you stood, that wasn't a slow burn. That was a plateau. And plateaus don't lead to depth. They lead to exits. If you're feeling a mix of clarity and sadness right now, that's normal. You're not mourning her. You're mourning the version of connection you hoped would form. Now, next, we'll talk about why chasing clarity only pushed her further away and how quiet control would have changed everything. But for now, ask yourself this. Did she ever move toward you emotionally, or were you the only one bridging the gap? When a woman truly loves you, her behavior changes without negotiation. You don't have to ask for clarity. You don't have to chase consistency. You don't have to explain why something hurt. The third sign she never truly loved you is this. You carried the emotional structure alone. You were the one initiating conversations, the one smoothing tension, the one checking in after distance. And over time, that creates imbalance. Not because effort is unattractive, but because unequal effort signals unequal investment. Emotionally invested women participate in repair. They don't leave you alone with the weight of the connection. If you always felt like you were holding things together, it's because she never fully stepped in. Another sign shows up in how she handled your boundaries. When you expressed a need, she saw it as pressure. When you pulled back, she labeled it distance. When you stayed calm, she felt you were changing. This happens when a woman benefits from your availability, but isn't anchored to you emotionally. Your boundaries disrupted her comfort, not her attachment. And that's a painful realization, because love respects limits. Comfort resists them. There's also something important about how she reacted to your growth. When a woman loves you, your confidence doesn't threaten her. It reassures her. If becoming more centered made her cooler, if your independence made her less responsive, she wasn't bonding to your strength, she was bonding to your accessibility. And the moment that shifted, the dynamic lost its value to her. Another overlooked sign is how she dealt with conflict. Love doesn't avoid discomfort, it moves through it. If she shut down instead of engaging, if she disappeared instead of resolving, if she framed every issue as too much, she wasn't invested in understanding you. She was invested in avoiding emotional work. That's not cruelty, it's avoidance. And avoidance and love don't coexist for long. Now here's where most men make the final mistake. They sense the disconnect and try to fix it with presence. More talking, more explaining, more reassurance, but presence without self-respect feels heavy. What creates attraction is stillness, not silence as a tactic, silence as emotional independence. When you stopped chasing and she didn't come closer, that wasn't proof you failed. It was confirmation. Because emotionally invested women feel the loss of access. Uninvested women feel relief. This is where the power shift could have happened. Not through withdrawal, but through grounded composure. When a man remains calm without withdrawing his value, he creates space for clarity. But clarity requires courage. And many men avoid it because clarity risks loss. So they stay in confusion instead. If you're listening to this and recognizing yourself, understand this. You didn't lose her by stepping back. You simply stopped carrying what she never helped build. So now we'll talk about how to reframe this, not as rejection, but as alignment, and how choosing yourself quietly resets everything. Before that, reflect on this. When you stopped trying to hold the connection together, did anything actually fall apart? Here's the truth that brings this full circle. If she never truly loved you, it wasn't because you were unlovable. It was because the connection never moved from comfort into commitment. And that distinction matters because comfort feels warm, familiar, even intimate, but it doesn't ask for courage. Love does. The final sign is the simplest and the hardest to accept. She never chose you when choosing meant risk. Not in words, in behavior. She didn't reorganize her life to include you. She didn't defend the bond when it felt uncertain. She didn't step forward when things required depth. She stayed where it was easy. And when ease ended, so did her presence. That doesn't make her a villain, it makes her human. But it also means the story you were holding on to wasn't real. And letting go of that story is where your power returns. Most men try to move on by replacing another woman, another distraction. But clarity doesn't come from replacement. It comes from reframing. This wasn't about proving your worth. It was about discovering where it was misplaced. Love that requires you to shrink, explain yourself, or stay uncertain is not love that sustains you. And the moment you stop trying to be chosen, you begin choosing yourself. This is where quiet power forms, not in detachment, not in bitterness, but in emotional sovereignty. You stop chasing closure. You stop rereading messages. You stop measuring your value through her responses, not because you don't care, but because you finally care about yourself more. Silence in this state isn't punishment. It's alignment. It's the natural result of no longer negotiating your worth. And something interesting happens when you reach this place. Your presence becomes lighter. Your attention becomes selective. Your energy becomes grounded. That's when attraction, real attraction, can exist again. Not because you learned a trick, but because you're no longer trying to fill a void. You understand now that love isn't built by giving more. It's built by standing steady. And the women who are capable of loving you will feel that stability immediately. They won't test it. They won't drain it. They'll meet it. The ones who can't will fade quietly. And that's not loss. That's filtration. So if you're alone tonight, questioning what went wrong, hear this clearly. Nothing broke. You simply outgrew a connection that never grew with you. And that awareness is the beginning of something stronger. Not louder, not flashier, stronger. So ask yourself this, honestly, are you still trying to understand why she didn't choose you? Or are you finally ready to choose yourself? If this helped you see something clearly, let it mean something. Leave a comment, not for validation, but to name what you finally understood. Clarity becomes real when you put it into words. If you want more grounded conversations like this about attraction, self-respect, and emotional control, subscribe, not to be entertained, but to stay aware. And if you know a man who's stuck in confusion right now, share this with him. Not to fix him, but to remind him he's not broken. That's how perspective spreads.